Let's talk about this. This will be a Conspiracy 420 episode 72. And this is the roots of the Son of Sam. And we're talking a little bit more about the Son of Sam. We had a special guest on the Rocker Mike and Rob Presents show, Manny Grossman. And he opened some kind of Pandora's box. And Mike got some information from a president getting blackmail to a cult to all kind of crazy phenomenon. And pretty much we're just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. So, Mike, what you got for me today?
Hi, Rob. How you doing? All right. This whole thing has been a fascinating couple of weeks. I mean, it started with our buddy George Figueroa, who I got to give credit for kind of beginning to open this Pandora's box for us, because he brought up about that Netflix series, The Sons of Sam.
Which was excellent if nobody's seen it.
It's a 4-part series. It's done very well on Netflix. A lot of people have seen it. And, it's a topic I've always been interested in since the time of The Son of Sam. Since I was a kid, I was fascinated by that whole thing. And
Mike, you were around that time, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was a kid, but I mean, I was so it's funny, the summer of '77, which I remember I was 8 years old. Okay, the summer of '77 is always one of those moments in my life that I remember things like the blackout. I was in Brooklyn, and I remember the rioting and people like that.
The Bronx
going
was
crazy. Yeah, the Bronx was burning. Everywhere was burning. And then the Son of Sam was going on at the same time. So, I mean, there was this element of fear in New York City that I kind of always got, always remembered. And if you weren't around then, or you were really just too young, you didn't pick up on it. But as people I know that were obviously adults, my parents' age and stuff like that, remember that as a very scary time. But with this thing here, George brought up the series, and he said, "Have you ever been to Untermyer Gardens?" And I've said, "No." What is that? He says, "That's Untermyer Park." And I said, "Well, isn't that where like a lot of the killings, the cult activity was going on around the Son of Sam?" And he said, "Yeah." So, just to give a little history, Untermyer Park is up in Yonkers, okay, and the Son of Sam cult. And again, you have to be familiar with the story. It's not just, David Berkowitz, the killer, doing all the shootings and getting his information from a talking dog. Okay, the Spike Lee movie, probably The Summer of Sam, probably did more damage to that, made people be brainwashed. People that weren't around then didn't understand what was going on then. Watching that movie, you would just think it was just some crazy guy punching holes in his walls and talking to a dog. Okay. It was a way, way more involved than that. The expert on it was a journalist named Maury Terry, who wrote a book in 1987 called The Ultimate Evil. I read this book.
Fantastic book.
Yes. I read this book when it came out, and I put it away. And I've always loved the story, but I never reread it until recently, and blew me away. Really blew me away reading it a second time. And he had a lot of. He studied the Son of Sam murders and the cult around it for 10 years before he wrote that book. And he had interviews with David Berkowitz even going into the early 90s after the book was written. Now, what got me interested in this so much is when me and George and our buddy Dan Scott went up to Yonkers to Untermyer Gardens. First of all, this is it's a estate that was bought by Samuel Untermyer, who was a very powerful, famous lawyer at the turn of the century, 20th century, in New York City. I'll go into him a lot in this show. When we went up there,
let me ask you, where does the last name come from? That's a weird last name.
He was a German immigrant of Jewish descent. He was a Jewish immigrant from the Bavarian southern Germany area, Untermyer. I don't know what it translates.
Was his mother Jewish?
Was his mother Jewish? Good question. I believe so.
Because that's the way, pretty much, if you're Jewish, you got to be from your mother.
I believe it was. She was, I should say. Her name was Therese Lodeva. It's a good question because Teresa is not really a Jewish name.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Yeah. You know what? That's a good point. I will get back to you about that. I didn't pick up on that. His father's name was Isidore. But let me just give you a little background about the park for a minute when we were there. It's a creepy place. Okay, it's based on kind of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. A lot of Persian designs in there. There's big sculptures of winged lions, and there's kind of like these almost like
it's bizarre shit up there.
It's weird. There's Roman pillars, actual Roman pillars that were brought from Italy, 2,000-year-old pillars. There's things that look like they could be altars and stuff like that. It's a creepy place, and the cult picked up on what was ever happened, what was creepy about this place, I guess, and they basically did their rituals there. There was a place called a carriage house. There was something called the Devil's Cave. The Devil's Cave is gone. It was demolished. That's where a lot of rituals were done. But the carriage house is still there, and you can still see some of the graffiti on it from that time. Most of it's been taken off, but you could still see it. There's also a pump house where the old Croton aqueduct with the old Croton aqueduct is the water supply, the old water supply to New York City. It's not used anymore. But these pump houses were access points to it. And on the old Croton Trail in Yonkers, you can go down into these pump houses back in the 70s and go down there and just hang out. And this is what they did. And it was a lot of rituals and crazy blood sacrifices and stuff going on. Now, my question that was really bugging me when I was at that park, and it bugged me afterwards, is why this place? Why Untermyer Gardens?
When you look at that thing, that whole thing, that thing with the lions, the wing, it looks like a coliseum, like a place that you want to do a freaking sacrifice.
Yes, I mean, there's a temple there with a Medusa's head on the ground in the middle of a bunch of tiles. A Medusa's head is painted in there. Also, if you look up Untermyer Gardens and you do see the, I believe it's called the Temple of Love, if I remember right, that at the bottom of what was called the 1,000 Steps with the Roman columns coming up, 2 Roman columns. Supposedly, back in the 70s when this place was in disrepair, you could lift up those tiles and there was a place under there where you could go down and sit. There were 2 stone benches and something like an altar inside. Now, why would that be there? Okay, why was that constructed into the original design? This goes back to the early part of the 20th century. My question was, why Untermyer Gardens? What was it about this place that this cult decided to go in there? There's lots of parks in Yonkers. I mean, yes, it was deserted. Yes, it was places that you could be hidden a little bit. Not entirely, though, because St. John's Riverside Hospital is right there. And people that worked in the hospital used to see into the woods and would see torches and hear chanting. This is back in the 70s, and things going on. So it wasn't that they were totally into being hidden. Otherwise, they would have gone somewhere else or deeper into the woods there. Okay? So it had something to do with the park. Now, Rob, Maury Terry interviewed David-Berkowitz.
Many times.
Right. And he was in contact with him through letters also, over the years. Berkowitz told Maury Terry that Samuel Untermyer was an occultist. He was in what was called the Golden Dawn, which was a cult that existed in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Now the probably the most famous person of the occult in the last few hundred years is Aleister Crowley. And Aleister Crowley was a member of the Golden Dawn. And Aleister Crowley was living in New York during the height of Samuel Antomaya's power, as a lawyer. And this was during the time of World War I. I'm going to get into all that now, little history about Samuel Untermyer. He was born either March 6th, March 7th, or June 6th, 1858. Nobody seems to know. He died March 16th, 1940. He was born, interesting enough, in Lynchburg, Virginia, to a father named Isidor Untermyer and a mother named Therese Lordaber. Both were German Jews from Bavaria. That is what the record says. Okay, now Therese is not exactly a German name, a Jewish name, but it's possible that her mother could have been Jewish and it could have been passed down, right? Yep. So his father, Isidor, was a lieutenant in the Confederate States Army. He fought for the South. Now, he died a year after the Civil War was over in 1866. After that, Untermeyer's family moved up to New York City. Untermyer, very smart kid, okay? He attended City College, and he got his lawyer degree at Columbia in 1878.
That's impressive, you know?
Yeah, he was 20 years old. 20 years old, okay? He recruited, once he was out of law school, he recruited one of his Columbia classmates named Lewis Marshall into his law firm with, I believe, a cousin of his named Randolph Guggenheimer, okay, in 1895. So he practiced independently and then started a law firm in 1895 called Guggenheimer, Untermyer, and Marshall. This was one of the most powerful law firms in the country and especially New York City for approximately 45 years. They dealt with mostly corporate law, okay? And then also in the later years of Untermeyer's life, he got into a lot of like political reform and welfare reform and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, he was a big proponent of the progressive era. Mm-hmm. And he was also the first lawyer to make $1 million on one case. Okay, he was the very first lawyer to make $1 million on representing one person for one case. And when I say he was a proponent of the progressive era, what was the progressive era? Well, this was an era in the early part of the 1900s where you had things like, there was guys like Teddy Roosevelt who were considered progressives on the Republican side. Untermyer was a staunch Democrat. So it didn't matter which side you were on. You could be progressive on both sides. But the progressives were, believed in big government. They believed in a lot of regulation on things. Guys like Teddy Roosevelt were big on breaking up the trusts that were going on.
Especially
bank
the
trusts.
stock market.
Right. A lot of the corporations were running amok. A lot of people getting ripped off. They needed to rein that in. But a lot of people don't know too that Teddy Roosevelt was a big conservationist. He was also he was into the environment and the ecology, and he wanted to preserve parklands. He started the National Park Service and all that stuff. Anyway, not to talk about him, but Untermyer politically was the opposite of a Teddy Roosevelt, but he was still a progressive. Now, progressives, some of them, more radical ones, believed in eugenics, which was basically weeding out the bad people, which in this case were the black and brown people. Okay, through weeding them out through birth control. Okay. People like Margaret Sanger, who started Planned Parenthood, was a big progressive person, okay? Big proponent of the eugenics. Margaret birth control back in the day, in the 20s and the early part of the 20th century, to people in black neighborhoods, Hispanic people, just to keep down those populations because she was a racist and believed that these people were inferior. Now, people like Hitler took this stuff to a farther degree. Okay?
Oh, hell yeah.
Right. Now, but getting back to Untermyer, now, he was also involved in what was called the Pujo Committee. The Pujo Committee was a committee that investigated the banking trust activities that were going on. Now, this was a bipartisan thing. Republicans and Democrats were interested in reining in what was going on Wall Street, the monopolies, the antitrust. We learned this in school, in high school, as kids, you know, about this time. And there's a lot of information out there on it. People could check it out, what was going on. A lot of things, there was definitely a power play going on at that time between the government and people that were wealthy, that were in business, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the JP Morgans. And I would have to say the Untermyers. Untermyer was extremely wealthy by this point, okay?
You got to think, him being a lawyer, the education he got, he needed money to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no evidence that he didn't have money even as a child. I mean, to move from Virginia up to New York City, you know, his father was a famous military guy, I guess. Who knows how he got that money? He was in the Confederate Army. Who knows what they did to get that kind of money?
Yeah, you know what's crazy about that? That's probably like old money that they were like, fuck these people. Let's just take our old money and start leaving that out.
I mean, it may have been money. They may have had money immigrating over here. Okay.
Yeah.
What was happening in the mid part of the 1800s that would have made Untermyer's family immigrate from Germany over to the United States was persecution. Okay, there's always been anti-Semitism and problems in that part of the world. It didn't just start with Nazi Germany. Okay, Eastern Europe and stuff, going back with the Russians in the early part of the 19th century, they were killing Jews. There's always been that kind of element there. I don't know if that's the reason they came over. I'm just assuming. I'm suspecting that, but I'm not positive. Okay, did he have money when he came over? Well, he must have had something, because you can't just come here. Okay.
Yeah.
You got to pay for a ship. You got to pay for, and to settle down in Lynchburg, Virginia, which was kind of a well-to-do kind of city at the time, and then he joined the Southern Army at some point. Who knows what kind of raping and plundering they did in the war? Okay, just throwing it out there. I have no proof of that. Okay, but getting back to.
But you're just throwing it out there.
I'm throwing it out there because, you know, if anybody listens and they go, well, yeah, I know this, or this, maybe they'll let me know. You know, maybe we'll find out from one of our listeners. And I mean, a lot of what I have here is fact. Most of what I have here is fact. But I am going to make some assumptions. But I will let you know when I'm doing that. Now, this Pujo committee that was investigating the monopolies and the banking trust stuff going on. The outcome of it ended up the creation of the Federal Reserve.
Yep.
Okay, now, what's the Federal Reserve? Federal Reserve is in charge of all our currency. People think because it says Federal Reserve, it's part of the government. It is not. It's a corporation. It's a private corporation. It's a private corporation that has never been audited in over 100 years of its existence. Okay, it has incredible control over our economy. It decides the interest rates, and you know, it's done things to manipulate our economy in ways that are definitely not good for the average people. In the 1930s, Roosevelt, FDR confiscated all of the gold of people. People gave up their gold. They voluntarily did it. Okay, we weren't allowed to hold a certain amount of gold by law. Okay, a lot of people gave it up. Did some people fight? Yeah. But in the long run, they really confiscated everybody's gold.
What do you think about that? That's kind of crazy.
Well, look, he manipulated people into belief, like, you know, the New Deal and the things going into the New Deal. There was a lot of, you know, almost fascism woven into that, and that's going to piss off a lot of people. Me saying that, because people to this day think FDR was like the greatest president of all time. And, you know, there was a lot of things he wanted to do. He was a progressive. He was part of the Wilson administration, which we'll talk about Wilson in a little bit.
You want to get into a guy that had definitely, if stuff came out from him, the guy wasn't as squeaky clean as people thought. He did a lot of deals. He did a lot of fucked up shit that people don't realize.
Yeah. I mean, he tried to pack the court, which is something we're hearing about today. All of this was progressive era politics, okay, and we're seeing it again today. Now,
Mike, I would say, doesn't that look like what's happening today?
It does. Which really blew my mind when I was researching this. I'm like, this is just like deja vu all over again. To quote Yogi Berra. Okay, deja vu all over again.
I guess what's the new goal? The new goal, watch them find a way to cancel out Bitcoin and all that money that you can't really, that you really can't watch that thing collapse.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The Federal Reserve has a lot of power, and too much power. And going back to its creation, it's really had no accountability. It does what it wants to do, and everyone just goes along with it, and everyone's in line with it because it's just another corrupt corporation. You got to wonder what this Pujo committee was really trying to do. Were they trying to just stop the control of maybe a few wealthy Donald Trump type people that were controlling things in the economy too much to their liking? See, now, just to get off topic for 1 second, J.P. Morgan was a person that they investigated. J.P. Morgan was considered, one of those robber barons, right? The Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the robber barons. Yeah. The people big on U.S. Steel, big on the railroads, all that stuff. Samuel Untermyer, his arch enemy at that time was J.P. Morgan. Okay, they had a rivalry that was back and forth in the press and everything. And during, I believe, the Pujo committee, he cross-examined J.P. Morgan.
Yep.
Okay, and it was big news at the time that he was going to cross-examine him, and he
wasn't one of his response was like. Was like, I like a little competition.
yeah, I like a little competition. And I believe it was J.P. Morgan that called Untermyer the Beast. Okay, and in a quote. And it's interesting because the Beast is the nickname to Aleister Crowley.
Oh.
Okay, now, let's just not assume anything. We don't know yet. Okay. Here's a story I want to tell. Okay. Samuel Untermyer was a big supporter of Woodrow Wilson. Okay, and really assisted getting him into power. He was a delegate in the Electoral College. Okay, in New York. He was involved in, a lot of Tammany Hall Democrat. Tammany Hall, we know was corrupt. Democrat things. Okay. He also identified himself as a Zionist. Now, what's a Zionist?
Yeah.
Was a person, and some people are still considered Zionists today, but it's kind of pointless. A Zionist was someone that was of Jewish descent that believed
I see nothing.
I know nothing.
I know nothing.
A Zionist was somebody that was interested in having a homeland for the Jewish people. This was before Israel was created. So Jews were scattered throughout Europe, throughout the United States, other parts of the world, and they did not have homeland. A Zionist was a person back in those days that was for the creation of that. Okay. Now, what I'm going to give you now is some information about Untermyer. It's based on a man named Benjamin Friedman's book. Okay. Benjamin Friedman wrote a book called Facts Are Facts. He was a Zionist. He was a comrade of Untermyer. Okay. Mm-hmm. They knew each other. I don't know if they were friends, but they knew each other. Part of the same movement. And Friedman, for reasons unknown to me at this point, broke this movement, actually became a Christian and converted and started to talk the Zionist movement and gave speeches even going into the 1960s. Okay. His speeches would actually be put on records. People could buy them and listen to them. Okay. And I'm not going to get into the politics of Zionism. Go ahead,
have you ever seen, have you ever heard, there's people that got records right DJs that they put his speech and then they put all this like techno music in the background. It sounds pretty creepy, and it's that guy talking.
Friedman? Really?
Yeah.
I have not heard that. That's holy. That's weird.
It's fucking weird. It's fucking bizarre, dude.
Oh, is that on
creepy
YouTube?
as
You got?
fuck.
Is that on YouTube?
Yeah, look it up. It's creepy as.
I did find.
Fuck.
Okay, I will check that out. But Friedman to me, makes a lot of sense in what he says. I don't know a lot about the guy. I'm going to research him more. But I don't want to get into all the politics of Zionism because we'll get thrown off the air, okay? but I will say that Untermyer was a Zionist. Now, right after Woodrow Wilson got into power and he was a new resident of the White House, he invited Samuel Untermyer over to dinner. And Untermyer said, sure. And he comes over, and surprisingly enough, to Wilson, okay, he starts to talk to him about a client he has who was a wife of a former Princeton professor that Woodrow Wilson was a colleague with back in his professor days at Princeton. Of course, he went on to be governor of New Jersey and then president, but he started out as a professor.
Yeah.
And he had with him at this dinner 4 letters that the wife of this colleague had that Woodrow Wilson had written her back when they were neighbors on the campus, okay, of Princeton. And apparently these letters are quite incriminating because it kind of showed almost an affair or possibly a desire to have an affair. Okay, Woodrow wrote these kind of endearing letters to her, and she kept them. So what happened to her was she ended up divorcing this professor that she was married to, remarried, and was living in the D.C. area. And her new husband had a son from a prior marriage who was in deep financial trouble. He was a banker. Now, it's unclear exactly what the details are, but it looks like he owed the bank that he worked for
Money.
which to me sounds like embezzlement, but I'm not sure. Okay, $40,000.
Mm-hmm.
So this woman felt that Woodrow Wilson might be the guy to help and pay off this debt. Well, Woodrow looked at the notes, and he said, "Yeah, I wrote these." He admitted it, and Untermyer said to him, "Well, she wants $40,000." So this is blackmail. This person is blackmailing the president of the United States through Untermyer.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Amazing. So Untermyer says, "Give me a couple of days to." Untermyer says to him, "I'll give you a couple of days to mull over this, because Wilson said I don't have $40,000 to spend." So a couple of days later go by, and Untermyer speaks to Wilson, and he says to him, "I have an idea on how you can get out of this problem. I will pay the $40,000, meaning Untermyer would pay this woman, his client, $40,000 that she's asking to get her stepson out of trouble, under one condition. Supreme Court pick happens. The next Supreme Court pick that you get, and there was one that was due. I think there was one justice that was going to retire or something like that. I want that pick. In other words, you would allow me to make this pick for you."
That's crazy, man.
And Woodrow Wilson agreed.
How crazy is that?
That's fucking nuts. Okay? So, not too long after, the Supreme Court pick comes up. Woodrow agreed to this, by the way. He said, "Okay, I'll do it." Okay? So, the pick comes up, and Untermyer calls him up, and he basically he said, "I want you to put in a guy named Louis Dembitz Brandeis for the vacancy." Now Brandeis.
Is that what the school Brandeis in New York City is named after him?
I believe so. Okay. Other right, because he was a famous New York. He was in politics, I believe. He was a lawyer. I don't know if he was an actual judge. It's a good question. Probably was on a lower court. Okay, but he was also the first Jew to ever sit on the Supreme Court. Okay, because he got appointed. Woodrow Wilson appointed him, and he got through the appointing process, and he became a Supreme Court judge. Brandeis even knew that this was how he got in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he became fast friends with Woodrow Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason that nobody quite understands. But if you check out what I'm going to say coming up, I think you can figure out why. Okay. What happened was they became fast friends. Now, Brandeis was part of this Zionist movement, same as Untermyer, same as Benjamin Friedman. So I believe Bernard Baruch was another person who was big, out of New York. Baruch College, the Baruch Projects, Baruch this, Baruch that. Okay,
Yeah.
You hear that name in New York City all the time.
All the time.
Okay, so when Brandeis was Supreme Court, he was palling around with Woodrow Wilson, and he was giving him advice, giving him political advice, things going on in the world at the time. What was going on? Well, the German the World War I began in 1914. Okay, the Germans were sinking British ships all over the place. Okay, there was that, are we going to get into this war? Are we not going to get into this war? Push and pull. Woodrow Wilson was publicly telling people, we won't get involved in a European conflict. It's not our fight. But behind the scenes, he was being told by Brandeis and some other people to get involved. Okay.
Yeah,
all right. Now, there's what the coincidence of 1914 being the beginning of World War I and 1914 beginning of the Federal Reserve is not a coincidence. All right. There's something there. All right. That war was financed by the biggest players of the world. The Rothschilds were involved in financing that war. Okay. Many other big families were involved with that. They supplied currency, money for both sides to keep that war going. Okay, the British government didn't have enough money to fight that war. It was a stalemate half the time, that war. When you read about it, nobody was really breaking through. All the fighting was done in France. Not one bit of fighting was ever done on German soil. Not one bit of fighting was ever done on British soil. It was all done on French soil. And they basically were going bankrupt in fighting this war, and they borrowed money to keep it going. Okay, the Rothschilds were big on financing that war, especially to England. Okay,
Yeah.
Anyway, so by April 17th, 1917, one of the main events that got us into World War I was the sinking of the SS Sussex in the English Channel. Now, the SS Sussex was a British ship, but at the time there were quite a few Americans on that ship.
Yes.
So a lot of Americans had lost their lives. Brandeis was saying that is enough reason to get into the war. Also, there was something out there about the German government through Mexico was trying to start a Mexican-American war. Supposedly letters were found between German spies and the Mexican government that's saying this was what they were trying to do. I always felt that was fake. That was fake. Fake news. Fake news.
But Mike, what's interesting about that? The German had a way of communicating, like by they were communicating with the boat, so they knew how to sink. They were sinking a lot of boats because they had this form of communication.
Yeah, well, I mean, World War I's fascinating. I mean, it was the first time that submarines were used.
Yeah.
Okay, though even in the Civil War, there was a couple of submarines used by us.
But not like this.
Not like this. They didn't have, the German U-boat perfected submarines. And of course, in World War II, it would be even more effective. Okay, but they had, and there were spies. There were German spies all over the world. Now, Untermyer, believe it or not, during the war, up to the war, okay, was pro-German. Okay, very pro-German. In fact, the history of the country of the United States, we were always pro-German. Okay. Now, what happened?
That's
right
wild.
around the time of the SS Sussex. Okay,
Yeah.
and even the Lusitania in 1916, the sinking of that. And the Lusitania is going to be important in a minute when I talk about Aleister Crowley. Okay, but the these events were happening. Ships were being sunk. Cargo was going to the bottom of the ocean. Millions and millions of dollars worth of shit lost. Okay, and what to do? Okay, do we get into this war? Do we not? The problem was the public was pro-German. All right, there were a lot of German American immigrants, right? German immigrants in America. They were doing very well in this country. Okay, they got into things like, in the case of Untermyer, law, politics. They got into breweries. I mean, all the beer that we drink in this country, okay, really came from German technology going back 150 years ago. Okay, even the Mexicans with Corona, the Germans taught them how to brew beer. They didn't know how to brew beer until the 1860s, 1870s. All right, the Germans were involved in Mexico and taught them how to brew. All right, so the country was mostly pro-German. But when these sinkings started to happen, the Zionist movement, who had a lot of control in the media, almost overnight, our media coverage switched. And all of a sudden, this was during World War I, but before our involvement, okay? All of a sudden, the media switched in this country, and we became totally pro-England, okay, and pro the Allied powers, okay? In World War
You want
I,
to hear something? You know
yeah.
what's one thing that Jewish people learned from the German?
What?
If you control the media, you control all the information, all the news.
I think they probably, maybe it's the other way around. I think that maybe the Germans got it from the Jews. I don't know. Okay.
No, but remember Germany, all the propaganda that were putting out, they control everything.
That was during the Second World War.
Yeah, the Second War. But
yeah,
but you're telling me you think the Germans learned it from the somebody told somebody.
Somebody figured something out. Okay, it might go back before that. Okay, I believe even under Marxism, Karl Marx talked about controlling the media and controlling the people. So there's all different reasons why they got to do it.
Brandes was very big about Jewish life and businesses, and this shit goes deep, man.
It is very deep. But what I got to emphasize is how much the country in the media flipped and became anti-German. Anything German was bad. They would depict German soldiers killing babies, eating babies in newspaper cartoons. You couldn't call a Frankfurter a Frankfurter. You had to call it a hot dog. That's how you get the word hot dog. Okay, it has to do with because during World War I, the Germans were considered evil in the media, and you had to change the name. Okay,
Mike, is that why there was so many Americans that were German sympathizer?
Yeah,
because they want to deal with this. It's crazy.
During World War I, there was Woodrow Wilson, and we could do a whole show on this guy. Okay, he created the American Legion.
Yeah.
Now we all know the American Legion today. The American Legion is a patriotic organization that supports veterans and people like that, and that's what they do. You have like American Legion halls and stuff like that. But how do they get started?
Great price. They got great prices on booze.
Yes, they do. Yes, any American Legion party, it's usually an open bar. Okay, so anyway,
and if they do, the Jack Daniels like 25 cents.
25 cents a
it's
shot.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. So, but the beginnings of the American Legion had nothing to do with what it became. It had to do with rooting out people that were against World War I. Okay? It had to do with ratting people out that were against World War I. Okay? Now,
where are your papers?
Right. people disappeared. People that spoke out against that war disappeared. Woodrow Wilson made them gone. No one knew what happened to them. Okay? We're kind of getting off topic because I want to bring it back to Untermyer a little bit. Okay? Now, Brandeis, influenced Woodrow Wilson enough that I think he decided to declare war.
Yeah.
Okay.
He did declare war.
So through Untermyer's interference and blackmailing this president, we got into a war. Now, why did he want that? Well, if he was a Zionist, the idea was that they would a Jewish homeland would come out of a war. Now, why would that happen? Because the Central Powers, which were Germany, and it was Germany and Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Now, what was the Ottoman Empire? Well, the Ottoman Empire had all Turkey, the Holy Land, okay, all the way going back for centuries, okay, the Muslim Empire. Now, out of the ashes of World War One, all right, came the destruction of the Ottoman Empire, and then you get countries like Iran, you get countries like Iraq, okay, countries like Jordan. They redrew the map. Woodrow Wilson spent 6 months away from the United States to work on the Treaty of Versailles to punish Germany for a war that they never started, okay? Blame them for the entire thing. And they were the biggest, most powerful country on the planet at that point, as far as technology, science, things like that. They were doctors, medical things, things like that. The German country was very powerful, okay? They also had a huge military, which was just defeated, all right? Out of that, other countries were redrawn. The map was redrawn. And there was a way, which I don't want to get into it too much, but there was a way to get a Jewish homeland out of that. So that's all I'm going to say with that, okay? And it did happen eventually, all right? Now, here's where I want to talk about getting back to the son Sam, because it seems like we've gone a long way to come back to this, okay? Why did the cult around the son of Sam pick Untitled Park? All right, well, Untermyer.
Hey, Mike, you got any relation to a Julian L. Baker?
No, not that I know of. Why?
Are you sure?
Yeah, why?
Because when we talk about Crowley and the Golden Dawn.
Oh, well, yeah, is there a person named that's in it? I don't,
He was one of the guys that started talking to Crowley, so I'm just asking you.
No relation that I know of, okay?
Okay.
Now, Untermyer, he was married to a woman named Minnie Carl Untermyer, okay? And Minnie
that name
Carl
almost sounds sinister.
It does kind of, right? Okay, now, let me back up before I get into Minnie Carl. I'm getting ahead of myself here. What's Untermyer's connection to the occult, if any? Well, David Berkowitz gave Maury Terry information about Samuel Untermyer, saying that the guy who owned Untermyer Gardens, where the sacrifices were done and the cult activity occurred, was a member of the Golden Dawn in his time. Now, what was the Golden Dawn? We could probably do a whole show on this. The Golden Dawn was a powerful occult organization based out of England, but they had chapters throughout the United States, and there was one in New York City, and it's called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And Untermyer was supposedly a member of this. Now, I'm assuming that what David Berkowitz says is true. I was unable to find any link between Untermyer and the Golden Dawn that says, yeah, he was a member of it during this time or whatever. But what's interesting is the circumstantial evidence around this. Now, Untermyer built this estate. He bought this estate, the Greystone Estate, from Samuel Tilden. Samuel Tilden was the former governor of New York State. He was involved in the famous 1870 election dispute with Rutherford B. Hayes, where the election went to Congress, and he's got the rug pulled out from under him, and Rutherford B. Hayes became president of the United States. Did he get the rug pulled out from under him? Yeah, he was sort of expected to be the winner, but he did not win because of wheelings and dealings in Congress that got Rutherford B. Hayes in there. Now, kind of sounds almost like what's happening today. He bought this estate from Tilden, and he wanted to create this estate, Untermyer Gardens, based on Persian design, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a lot of strange designs that to me look like they could be something of the occult. Okay. There's that one so-called temple with the Medusa's head inside on the tile. There's also, like I said, the two Roman columns that were actual Roman columns, 2,000-year-old Roman columns that were brought over from Rome and planted there with that altar and bench area that was underground on the outside, that you would lift this up and go down into this area where you could sit, and there was like an altar right there. Okay. Also, there's secret tunnels all through Untermyer Gardens. Now, a lot of them supposedly have been sealed up now. They've been fixing up the park. The park is in control by the city of Yonkers and I believe the state, and there's a lot of restoration going on, but there's a lot of weird tunnels between these different statues and structures throughout the park. Okay. Now, when you're in Untermyer Park, there's a general creepiness about the place. You don't hear a bird sing. You don't hear a bug. You don't hear an animal. It's very eerily quiet in there. Okay. And you walk around and, you can go on a guided tour. In my case, when I went, me and George and Dan just dicked around and checked all these places out on our own. We were trying to stay off the beaten trail, away from the tour. But we were looking at all these things. And we found some of these like entrances to tunnels. They were sealed off. Doors were concreted up. But these were places that there were tunnels underneath this whole park. Why do you have that? What's in those tunnels? Okay. We don't know. All right. Now, during the time of World War I, 1914, 1915, Aleister Crowley, who was the occultist that most people think of when they think of the occult, he influenced everybody from, Jimmy Page, Jimmy Page bought his mansion on Loch Ness in Scotland. We could do a show about Aleister Crowley. It's crazy, crazy, crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's some crazy shit.
Yeah. Now, he came to New York, and he was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. He would later leave that order and start the OTO, which was a order that, should I say he started it? Because I'm not certain, but he became a member of it. But even in the Golden Dawn and in the OTO, he was always kind of a rebel, a renegade. He didn't follow the rules. In fact, when he was in the OTO later on, he was sort of kicked out for a while because he was talking too much and exposing how sex could bring magical powers. Now, Aleister Crowley was a bisexual. He also had sex with prostitutes constantly. He believed in this power that could be brought on through sexual intercourse. Occultic power. Okay.
Oh, you can float. You can fly like Superman.
Exactly. Right. So that's what he was very involved with that. Now, when he came to the United States, he actually sailed over on the Lusitania. Okay, which I thought was a crazy connection. About 2 years before it was sunk by the German submarines.
That's pretty sad.
He settled in. He settled in an area around West 36th Street. Okay, what he began to do was sell or try to sell to people his published works. He had books of poetry, he had books of the occult, things that he wrote, and he was selling them. Now, you would think that's kind of strange. Well, not really, because at that time, people were very interested in the occult. Average people, okay?
Yeah.
It was especially the elites of New York City, okay? The elites of probably Washington, D.C., okay? The elites of the world, okay? The powerful people, many of them
Mike,
were into the occult.
That goes all the way back to the Bones and Skull, the Masons, all these people that supposedly they're like cults, but even to Bohemian Grove, all this stuff is connected. The elites have its own. It's like members only.
Yeah,
you gotta have a certain amount of money to join these groups.
Why do they get into the cult? An occult because of power. They want to keep their power. They want to gain more power, more control.
And they also want to have something over other rich people so they don't fuck each other.
Right. And a lot of it had to do with having this power based on sex. Okay. Yes. Now that's when you start getting into things like pedophilia. Okay. You start getting into, these, sex with children, sex with same sex, all kinds of things to create this power and magic. Okay.
Yep.
To advance your stance in society. Okay.
It's insane.
It's insane. Now,
sex, power, and money. Come on.
Yeah.
Those are the three most craziest shit ever, and everything, and that's the way the world's controlled, man. Like, you know what? It's like, dude, the guy with the most money has a beautiful wife. You don't see too many rich guys with ugly wife.
No. Now, interestingly, is when Aleister Crowley got to New York, he connected with a guy named John Quinn, who ended up buying a lot of his books and stuff, okay? John Quinn was a very powerful lawyer in New York, okay? He had actually, at that point, about 2 years earlier, gave up on law, practicing law, and he became a patron of the arts, okay? Now, what's the patron of the arts? A patron of the arts is a person that, promotes art. And art could be paintings, it could be manuscripts, books, it could be music, okay? All different things that you might consider art. When you become a patron of the arts, you're usually a very wealthy person, and you promote these things, and you help these artists. Okay, nothing wrong with that, okay? But Quinn bought a lot of Aleister Crowley's work, interestingly, okay? Now, why would you do that? You're obviously promoting the occult. Okay, or you're interested in the occult itself. Now, John Quinn was when he was a lawyer, he was involved in Tammany Hall politics. All right. Now he gave it up because his candidate for the 1912 election didn't get the Democratic nomination. Woodrow Wilson did. Okay. Now there were some other candidates. I'm not certain who Quinn was for on the Democrat side, but it wasn't Wilson. Okay. So he quit that, and he gave up that and became a patron of the arts. He also got involved with Irish nationalist causes. What he did was, during World War I, he also worked for British intelligence, this guy, John Quinn. Now, guess who else worked for British intelligence?
Who?
Aleister Crowley.
Whoa.
Aleister Crowley, during World War I, was a double agent, okay? He infiltrated the pro-German people and organizations in New York and other parts of the United States and reported back to British intelligence what was going on.
Wow.
Okay? Yes. He even, would give speeches, giving these pro-German speeches. They were almost crazy sounding, I don't have an example of one, but just crazy pro-German. And the pro-German people would flock to him, and he would report back what they were saying, if they were organizing any problems, this and that, okay? During World War I, the army used to keep on Governor's Island, right off of Manhattan. There was an ammunition dump there. They kept tons of ammunition. Well, German spies blew that up. Okay, during World War One, they blew up that dump. All right, so the war had kind of like reached our shores in a way. Okay, now it was a serious thing that we a lot of pro-German people, especially in the New York on the East Coast area. Okay, they needed to be watched, and Crowley volunteered to do this. John Quinn was a person that helped him with this. Okay, now did he get him involved? I'm not sure exactly what the connection is there. Probably got him involved with it, and then just was a person he answered to. Now, do you think, this is assuming, I have no proof of the connection, but do you think that Untermyer, being a hot shot shark of a lawyer, getting involved in Tammany politics, do you think it's a good chance he knew John Quinn?
Yeah, well, it's a very, 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 very definitely good chance to know each other.
I think they had to know each other.
Oh, they
I
had.
think if they were both lawyers in New York City, hot shot $1 million lawyers.
Yeah,
okay?
And if they did, they probably had a lot of the same bedfellows.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So here's where it starts to get a little bit of a gray area, and I'm going to just draw some lines here that I think connect, but I could be totally wrong. Okay. Let me talk about.
You could be totally right. Somebody from the family will come see you and
shit.
Bye, RockerMike.
Yeah, you better shut up about this. How much you gonna pay me? So, again, the Untermyers were involved in Tammany Hall. Untermyer was, and Quinn was, and Quinn was involved with Aleister Crowley on that, espionage level, but he was also involved with them from an artistic perspective, from his books of poetry, books of the occult. Now, let's go to Untermyer. Untermyer was married to a woman named Minnie Carl Untermyer. Okay, and she was a patron of the arts. All right, her thing was music. All right, and she got Gustav Mahler, the famous classical musical artist, to conduct the New York Philharmonic at one time, which was a big deal. She was also the president of the Poets Society of America. All right, and she was the daughter of a journalist named Manilius Carl. Now, Manilius Carl and his daughter Minnie were German immigrants, okay, but they were not Jewish. Now, I think it's very interesting that a man named Samuel Untermyer, who was a Zionist, very pro-Jewish causes, wanted a Jewish homeland, would not marry a Jew. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Why would he not marry a Jew? Okay.
That was weird about his grandson was a nuclear chemist, right?
Yeah, and his son Erwin was a famous judge in New York as well.
How funny is it
that
whole family stayed there? They're still in power in a way, or they all ran for governor, or they were all lawyers.
Well, there was a lot of money. There's a lot of money there. He was a very, very wealthy man. When he died, his kids did well. He passed it on to them. But Untermyer, why would he not marry a Jewish woman? Why would he not think that was important to do? Because in the Jewish faith, you pass down your Jewish faith through your mother. So it would be important for a man to marry a Jewish woman to pass down the Jewish faith. Now, you could say, well, maybe he just fell in love with this woman and it was perfect and he didn't care. Okay. But then you have all these other, pro-Jewish causes. Not every Jew in those days was a Zionist. Okay. No. They weren't. Okay. Interestingly, though, is that
interesting that those people are like New York Jews, right?
Right.
And all these people push for that land, right? And it's so funny now that the New York Jew and the Israeli Jews, they just shit on each other.
Yeah. Well, we got to be careful where we go with this. What you're saying, Rob, because
No, but I'm saying they really do. Like they're like,
yeah.
"No, we live in Israel, this and that." Because that's not Israelis here, but they definitely treat the New York Jews different than the Israelis.
Well, New York Jews or the Upper West Side limousine liberal type of Jewish person
Yeah,
is very liberal, okay, and then liberal today is usually anti-Israel, so
yeah.
you have that split within the Orthodox and the Reform Jews, and there's a whole very touchy area.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
crazy. So
it is.
that
But
you
I was doing my research for this show literally 10 minutes before we started, okay, because I found out something just right before we started the show. The wife, okay, Minnie Carl,
yeah.
okay, married to Manilius Carl. Now I said, he's a German guy from Germany, immigrates to the United States. Where does he get this name Manilius? Okay, and why does that sound like an old name, like a Roman name or something like that? Why would it Manilius? Well, guess what? Okay,
What?
Manilius in Roman times was an astrologer and a poet. Okay, and he wrote a 5-volume book of poetry called the Astromachon. And the Astromachon is the first literary book that links human affairs with the zodiac. So this guy is named after Manilius. Why would you, what kind of family is this? I wonder. Okay. Now, here's where I'm going to make some stretches here. Okay. And again, I'm just drawing lines. I don't have enough facts to say that this is true. But is it possible that Untermyer was married to a woman, Minnie Carl, that was into the occult? Now, her patron of the arts title would have put her in touch with a lot of people in New York City at the time, possibly Aleister Crowley.
Wow.
Okay, she used to have parties and invite people to Untermyer Gardens that were writers and musicians and poets and people like that. Is it possible? Again, got no proof. Is it possible that Aleister Crowley was a guest maybe one day at Untermyer Gardens? Did he attend that place? DavidBerkowitz told Maury Terry that Untermyer rubbed elbows with Aleister Crowley. That's the quote. Rubbed elbows, and was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Dawn, Golden Dawn.
Wow.
So, I'm maybe it's a stretch, maybe it's not. Why would a guy who was supposedly so pro-Jewish marry a non-Jewish woman who possibly has an occult background, or definitely may have been rubbing shoulders with people in the occult based on her patron of the arts? Okay, now, this man, Untermyer, blackmailed a president of the United States in order to put in a person in the Supreme Court of his liking and his choosing. Now, this person was very instrumental in getting us into World War I, okay, which basically changed the order. That war changed the world order of the world, toppling Germany and Europe as the most powerful people in the world to the United States. The creation of the Federal Reserve in 1914 marks also the beginning of World War I. We get involved 3 years later after a series of events involving some American citizens, the sinking of the Lusitania, the sinking of the SS Sussex, and other events possibly at the Mexican border and other things. Did that get us into that war? See what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's too
See
many.
what I'm getting at? Okay. Now, Son of Sam cult. Why did they pick that location? Well, seems like there's occult symbols in the garden. And if Berkowitz knew that Untermyer was a member of the Golden Dawn, then there must have been people much older than him involved in this cult, because he supposedly only got into the cult about a year before the murders, 1974-75. Okay? These murders in Yonkers and Untitled Park, and Manny Grossman talks about this, but they were going on for decades, even going back to the 50s or maybe even the 20s, or maybe even during Untermyer's time. Why did he build an altar underneath that little temple with the Roman columns?
It's wild, dude.
What kind of sacrifices would you do on an altar? Okay. They've dug up bodies in Untermyer Park, okay, over the decades. There's reports of that going back to the 60s. Okay. Children have disappeared from Yonkers orphanages. In Maury Terry's book, they talk about possibly sacrificing children. We know dogs were sacrificed. They found German shepherds. That's all part of the Son of Sam story. All right. So I wanted today to really drop this on everybody as the first episode of The Roots of Son of Sam. We're going to talk more about these things in coming episodes over the next maybe few weeks or months. Okay. Manny Grossman has done a great show. Check out his YouTube channel under Manny Grossman. He's putting a lot of information out there. But I wanted to take this in a little bit of a different direction than what he's doing, because I found it so fascinating that Untermyer Park has this creepy feel. It made me think, why this park? Who was Sam Untermyer?
Yeah.
And when I started researching this, okay, it blew my mind. All right. A lot of the stuff I found online, just searching Untermyer, and it just led me from one thing to another. The stuff about the Woodrow Wilson being blackmailed is out of Benjamin Friedman's book. Okay. And he was, in the Zionist movement and left the movement, broke away from it. Even converted to Christianity. But during that movement, he knew Untermyer. He knew what Untermyer to Woodrow Wilson. He wrote about it, talked about Brandeis and the involvement in eventually trying to obtain a Jewish homeland and all that. Now, I just was blown away when I started doing all this. I'm like, this is like geopolitics. This is like world level shit. Okay. But on one level, it's world level stuff. And on another level, there's an occult thing going on here. Right? I mean, there's definitely some connection here.
There's definitely a lot of shit going on, man. Like,
yes. What high levels of shit going on here? These people, that were into the occult at that time in the 20th century were the elites. They were the politicians. They were the big lawyers. They were the big judges. People wanting power, all dabbled in the occult. Okay, Aleister Crowley was there. He was nicknamed the Beast, Aleister Crowley. And at one point, J.P. Morgan called Untermyer the Beast. I thought that was an interesting coincidence, if it is a coincidence.
It's so crazy, man. Like, you know what? You can see how this leader, all these people, they were all leaders, and they all worked. They all had the same bedfellows. And you start looking it up. One name links to another name to another name, and it works all the way to the top.
Yeah, exactly. Works all the way to the top.
Because once you blackmail the president, you try to put this guy, and guess what? That goes all the way to the top.
Yeah, and it influenced world decisions. Okay. Out of the outcome of World War I. World War I, like I said, was a stalemate until our involvement. Okay. And that kind of tipped the scales a little bit towards the Allied powers, and they were able to crush Germany back, push them back. Again, no part of the war was ever fought in Germany. No Allied troops ever went in. That was saved for World War II. Now, I'll just mention in passing as we wrap up the show, is that, Untermyer went on into, an old age. He was supposed to retire and in the 1930s, but he never really did. He just loved being involved with these things. He was on almost a world stage, or definitely a national stage. He basically, made a speech coming off a steamship from England in the 1930s, saying that, Hitler is going to kill all the German people, and we need to have a boycott of Germany. And this speech was made at the docks when he got off the ship. And a boycott was begun. Okay, the Zionist movement protested all over New York City, any places that were carrying German-made goods. Okay, it was said that Woolworth had to dump millions of dollars worth of dishes and crockery and pots and pans and stuff, which is something that Germany exported to the United States in those days. We would buy a lot of that.
Budweiser?
Budweiser. Well, maybe I don't know. I mean,
the name Weiser, just call it Bud.
Yeah, right. Brooklyn, you had the Schaefer Brewery at that time. You had the Rheingold Brewery at that time. The Schlitz Brewery was all in Brooklyn. Those people were affected by what was going on in this protest movement. Now, not going to get into the politics of it, but I think it's interesting that Untermyer actually had this much power at the time. Now, he would pass away in 1940, and he obviously didn't see us defeat Hitler, okay, which I'm sure he would have loved, and Hitler needed to be defeated. I'll just add that. But he's buried up in Woodlawn Cemetery in a very interesting-looking grave.
It's like a little kid with a woman or something. Is that the one?
It's very tall. It has these like doors on it that open on all sides.
Yeah, but he got some creepy statues.
It's just one of those real creepy, old world monuments to himself. I didn't look at it that closely, but maybe I'll go up there one day and I'll look at it and check out what it is. Maybe there's something on the grave that gives it away. If there is any occult belief. Maybe there might be, there might be some symbol, there might be something, might do that. But so that's all I got for you today, Mr. Rossi.
Wow, man, you took us to a fascinating journey. And this is anytime we do series like this, they always do very well. Like we did the monster series did well, the churches stuff did well.
Yeah.
And I always say one day I'm gonna tell my story of the Bible and how I navigate the Bible, from the quotes to bribery to scandal to blackmailing.
Well, I mean, the Old Testament is full of a lot of people getting lumped up.
It's all about when you think about it. All this stuff just keep recorded. It's just different names, different people, different time, but everything keeps getting recycled, believe it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, well, history repeats itself, right?
Yeah, and even though we know it, and
it keeps happening.
It keeps happening.
That's because there's only so many combinations of evil, I guess.
Yeah. So, Mike, this is another great show, man. You hit out of the ballpark, and we'll get back to you guys with another part of the Roots of the Son of Sam.
Real soon.
This is an ongoing series that will give you updates all the time, and we'll continue doing this. And the more information we get, the more we're gonna tell you. And Mike done a lot of research, so he's doing a good work. He's doing a hell of a job keeping us up with new ways of thinking and seeing people from the past.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of connections with this case. I mean, like I said, almost at a world stage level, almost. Yeah, that's bizarre.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know what? You think of all that stuff, that almost lead to the creation of the United Nations.
Yes, and I mean, and what is that? You know,
Yeah,
there's a lot of
crazy
history.
that is.
Yep. So.
Oh
All
my
right.
God, that just blew my mind.
Yeah. So
All right, so like we always do, don't get drunk,
get lumped up,
get
people.
up, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.